So this is the question. Looking at the Hanukkah, we see that there is a spine and there are arms coming out of it. So maybe we do have a spine. Next one. Thinking about the question. Next one. And there we go, going out to get our different Chanukiot. Let's go to the next one. The question is really, why are we so puzzled? We're puzzled because there are many. There are many Jewish ideologies, varieties of expression, multitude of sources, many languages all over the world, many people. Let's continue. For example, when do we light the Chanukiah? There are so many different rabbinical sources to answer this question, not to talk about time zones. Next one, the variety. Let's look at some of the reasons. We talk about historical reasons, cultural reasons, rational reasons, and different ways of educating. Next one, please. Let's take an example of Hanukkah. The historical circumstance of geographical diaspora is one of the reasons for the diversity. There are a few stories about the celebration of Hanukkah. The oldest one has to do with the rededication of the altar. Only much later on, the story of the oil that sufficed for all the days of Hanukkah entered our culture because of a decision of a few people. Let's continue. Educated leadership. One of the most interesting things in our culture, probably one of the first cultures that did that, was to empower its leadership to make the decisions in different places, in different ways, and sometimes in the same place in different ways. For example, if we talk about the rededication of the altar at a certain period, and then we talk about the miracle of the supply of the oil. These are two different ways to encounter the same holiday. And the decision of what you actually do is the decision of your local leadership. Not that the local leadership didn't have a network. They did, but not one network. There were a few networks, and sometimes the networks operated at the same time. So you had vertical and a horizontal set of networks. Therefore, the outcomes were different. Continue, please. Rationalist Judaism promotes culture of dialogue and unresolved dispute. If anybody would ask me why do I think the Jewish people survived and why I think they will survive, is because we can deal with dispute. Not only can we like it. This is part of our culture. Part of our culture is to critically think, is to ask questions, is to engage in dialogue, and to accept the fact that we don't always agree. And we still are able to have that within our culture. Let's continue. For example, how do we light the Chanukiah? Do we light it from 1 to 8 or from 8 to 1? And there are two, next one, very famous rabbis, Hillel and Shammai, who disagreed. One thought we accumulate candles every day, and the other one thought the other way around. By the way, what we do at home is we start Hanukkah with 2 Chanukiot, and we end Hanukkah with 2 Chanukiot. And they look very much similar, the first and the last day. Let's continue. The other thing was a culture of communities. When you have a community, you don't only have a leader. You have people in the communities who make decisions. And the different communities decided what they celebrate and how they celebrate. For example, next one please, the question of who can light or who should light the Chanukiah has always been part of our dispute. Next one. Making Chanukiot very much depended on where you lived. For example, if you lived in France And the most beautiful building you've ever seen was the cathedral in Chartres. So when you had to dream, what did the temple look like? This was your vision. And how did you choose what it is you are focusing on? You went back to read the Bible and you read what was in the temple. And one of the things that was in the temple was something which was called Maas Shoshan, something with a rose. And the Rosetta, taken from the cathedral in Chartres, suddenly appears on a Hanukkah in France, a community in France. Now let's go to Poland. Now think about it, that the most beautiful building you've ever seen in your little town was the synagogue. So that's what you chose to depict in your Hanukkah. And if you lived, next one, in Algeria, you looked at the most beautiful mosque and you used that as your inspiration for your Hanukkah. And if you lived in Algeria and you had visited Venice, next one please, this is what your Hanukkah would look like. So basically sharing the same story, but interpreting it differently, having been legitimized to do so by your leadership, by your members of the community, enables us the diversity. But being so different, are we still one? At this point, I would continue. So some of the outcomes of this circumstances that we spoke about and the different ideologies is this biblical tradition, is the vast literary culture that we have, is the education system which promotes questioning, are the different streams of Judaism, and also the reaction to stop diversity is part of our diversity. Let's continue. So we talked about asking questions. Let's continue. And we talk about a source. Is there a source? That's a good question. But certainly Hebrew presents a problem, but also a challenge for, and an ability for creativity. Because not everybody speaks the language. So you need somebody to explain it to you. And when you need somebody to explain it to you, they will choose how to explain it to you. And then it goes on and on. Some other time I'll tell you about that illustration. That was fun. The next is really the creative interpretation. Remember that there was a menorah in the temple, and there is a description of that menorah, but as we saw before, many communities decided to be creative and to see other things in the menorah, and here are some other depictions of modern menorahs. And then there is also the question, next one please, for example, what do we light? Do we light candles? Look at this new modern menorah. Let's continue. What do we light? Do we light oil? Because is our story a story about the oil? Let's continue. Do we light with matches? And there is another interpretation. Or do we light, next one, virtually? Which is another new interpretation. So, let's continue. It does sound like we are many. Next. Oneism is a choice. I believe it's an ideology. The reality is that there is plurality. The ideology is to make it into pluralism. What Natan said before, that there were the Israelites and the Judeans at the same time, and they were all part of the Hebrew people, and they fought each other, that does not negate the fact that there was plurality. It negates the fact that there wasn't pluralism. Pluralism is a matter of choice and ideology. Next, please. So I believe we can choose an ideology of oneism. Because, as was said here before, I care about my grandchildren. And for them to be Jewish, I need to choose to be Jewish. I need to choose to connect or to belong or both to something which is united. Love increases itself by sharing with others. A candle loses nothing by lighting another. Let's go on. So it is up to us to be one. We need to decide if we want to, and if we want to, it's part of our ism, it's part of our ideology, and we have to be very inventive, like I said yesterday, of how to get there. Next one, please. So we need to write a ketubah. When two people get together, they don't lose anything by the fact that they give their love to the other person. They gain a partnership. They gain generations to come. So it's up to us to figure out what is this oneism. Not only what actually happens, the fact that there is diversity, but how do we keep this together? Where do we go from here? So now we just need to write up a ketubah. The illustration is already there.